We will be discussing today the global media cultures, globalization, and media, creating the global village. How our media affects or impact the globalization in creating the global village. According to Jacques Ellul, globalization and media, global village of Babel. He said that because I am a professor, I will later give dry, dense, detailed definitions for globalization and media. But for now, a perfectly good definition of globalization is anytime, anyone does anything, anywhere, across borders. And a perfectly good definition of media is anything people use to communicate. Those definitions work because they emphasize people and human action. First thing that you have to understand is globalization and media have created the conditions through which many people can now imagine themselves as part of one world, according to the Sage Handbook of Globalization. Here are the objectives of our discussion. Recognize, recognize the significant role of media in the ongoing process of globalization. Compare the social impacts of different media on the process of globalization. Third, explain the dynamic between local and global cultural production. Fourth, define responsible media consumption. The Contemporary World by Lisandro Claudio and Patricio Abinales. Media as a means of conveying something, such as channel of communication. Three kinds of mass communications. First is the print media, second is the broadcast media, and the third is the digital media. In print media, we have books, magazines, and newspapers. In the broadcast media, we have radio, film, and television. In digital media, we have the email, internet sites, social media, internet based video and audio. We will be discussing the evolution of the media and the globalization. Here are the periods of the media evolution. First, we have the oral. Second, we have the script. And third, we have the print. And fourth, we have the electronic. And fifth, digital. Speech is the most overlooked medium in histories of globalization. Yet the oral medium, human speech, is the oldest and most enduring of all the media. Among the periods, we have the first oral, and this is the oldest and the most enduring of all the media. Speech has been with us for at least 200,000 years, script for less than 7,000 years, print for less than 600 years, and digital technology for less than 50 years. When speech developed into language, Homo sapiens had developed a medium that would set them apart from every other species and allow them to cover and conquer the world. How did oral communication aid in globalization? Because language allowed humans to cooperate and share information through oral communication during the primitive times. So, language was their most important tool. So, in globalization, oral communication did made an impact in the globalization. So, that's language. No? It is the most important tool. Language helped humans move, but it also helped them settle down. Language stored and transmitted important agricultural information across time as one generation passed on its knowledge to the next, leading to the creation of villages and towns. Language led to markets, the trade of goods and services, and eventually into cross continental trade routes. Organized permanent trading centers grew, giving rise to cities, and perhaps around before Christ, humans' first civilization, Sumer is thought to be the birthplace of the wheel, plow, irrigation, and writing, all created by language. Second, we have the script. Script is the very first writing allowed humans to communicate and share knowledge and ideas over much larger spaces and across much longer times. Writing has its own evolution and developed from cave paintings, petroglyphs, and hieroglyphs. Early writing systems began to appear after 3000 BC with symbols carved into clay tablets to keep account of trade. These cuneiform marks later developed into symbols that represented the syllables of languages and eventually led to the creation of alphabets and the scripted letters that represent the smallest sounds of language. Writing was done at first as carvings into wood, clay, bronze, bones, stone, and even tortoise shells. Ancient Egypt created one of the most popular writing surfaces from a plant found along the Nile River, the papyrus, from which the English word paper eventually derived. With script on sheets of papyrus and parchment, humans had a medium that catapulted globalization. Scripts allowed for the written and permanent codification of economic, cultural, religious, and political practice. The great civilizations from Egypt and Greece to Rome and China were made possible through script, according to Powell 2009. The third, print media. It started the information revolution and transformed markets, businesses, nations, school, churches, governments, armies, and more. The earliest known form of printing as applied to paper was woodblock printing, which appeared in China before 220 AD. Later developments in printing technology include the movable type invented by Bi Sheng around 1040 AD and the printing press invented by Johannes Gutenberg in 15th century. From a survey of the historian Elizabeth Einstein 1979, printing press changed the very nature of knowledge. It preserved knowledge which had been more malleable in oral cultures. It also standardized knowledge which had become more variable as it spread orally across regions and lands. Scripts and papyrus had begun the process of preservation and standardization, but not nearly to the extent allowed by printing press. Print encouraged the challenge of political and religious authority because of its ability to circulate competing views. Printing media helped foster globalization and knowledge of globalization. Fourth, we have the electronic media. It requires the use of electromagnetic energy or electricity. Samples are telegraph, telephone, radio, film, and television. The vast reach of this electronic media continues to open up new vistas in the economic, political, and cultural processes of globalization. Samuel F.B. Morse began work on a machine in 1830s that eventually could send coded messages, dots and dashes, over electrical lines. The telegraph was a sensation during that time with significant consequences. Radio developed alongside the telegraph and telephone in the late 1890s. The technology was first conceived as a wireless telegraph. The ability to transmit speech over distance was the next communication breakthrough. Though not always considered a mass medium, the telephone surely contributed to connecting the world. Alexander Graham Bell is credited with inventing the telephone in 1876. The creation of cell phone in 1973 was especially crucial in the context of globalization and media. For much of the 20th century, radio was the only mass medium available in many remote villages. Radio was crucially involved with the upheavals of globalization during this time. Along with the telegraph, telephone, and radio, film arose as another potent medium. Silent motion pictures were shown as early as the 1870s, but as a mass medium, film developed in the 1890s. Film soon developed into an artistic medium of great cultural expression. Television, on the other hand, is considered the most powerful and pervasive mass medium yet created. In the US Census Bureau's statistical abstract, number of homes with television before 1950, it's only 10%. 5 years time after, 64.5%. And the 1960s, 87.1%. And end of the 1960s, half the centuries or half the countries in the world had television stations. Television brought together the visual and oral power of film with the accessibility of radio. People sat in their living rooms and kitchens and viewed pictures and stories from across the globe. The world was brought into the home. For some scholars, the introduction of television was a defining moment in globalization. Marshall McLuhan proclaimed the world a global village largely because of television. The global village. One of the most important consequences of communication media for globalization has been through media. The people of the world came to know of the world. That is, people have needed to be able to truly imagine the world, imagine themselves acting in the world for globalization to proceed. By global village, McLuhan meant that as more and more people sat down in front of their television sets and listened to the same stories, their perception of the world would contract. If tribal villages once sat in front of fires to listen to collective stories, the members of the new global village would sit in front of the bright boxes in their living rooms. A lot of early thinkers assumed that global media had a tendency to homogenize culture, in particular the American culture. The 1976 media critic Herbert Schiller argued that not only was the world being Americanized, but that this process also led the spread of American capitalist values like consumerism. According to Jack Lull, Instead, these partners, globalization and media, are combining to create a dark and divided village. A village of gated communities and border walls, vigilantes and refugees, hunters and hunted garrisons and ghettos, suffering and surfeit, beauty and decay, alienation and mediation. And fifth evolution is the digital media, are the most often electronic media that rely on digital codes, the long arcing combination of O's or zeros and ones that represent information. Digital media. The computer is the usual representation of digital media. The computer comes as the latest and some would argue most significant medium to influence globalization. Computers have revolutionized work in every industry and trade. They streamline tasks, open up new areas and methods of research, and allow any company or industry access to global marketplace. Some of the largest companies in the world, such as Microsoft, Apple, Google, Facebook, and more, arose in the digital era and have been instrumental to globalization. In the realm of politics, computers allow citizens access to information around the world, even information that governments would like to conceal. Blogs, social media, Twitter, text messaging, and more allow citizens to communicate among themselves, and computers have transformed cultural life. Access to information around the globe allows people to adopt and adapt new practices in music, sports, education, religion, fashion, cuisine, the arts, and other areas of culture. Digital media have revolutionized daily life. Social media and the creation of the cyber ghettos. Apart from the nature of diverse audiences and regional trends in cultural production, the internet and social media are proving that the globalization of culture and ideas can move in different directions. Social media have both beneficial and negative effects. These are the positive effects of the social media. Social media can be used as a voice of reason in society. Social media has enabled more young people to be creative and innovative. Social media has given teens the ability to hone different skills that are important in the real world. Social media can be used to educate young people. Social media gives teens skills to become more confident and independent. And these are the negative effects of the social media: anxiety and depression, poor sleep quality, body image concerns, cyberbullying, social skills issues, privacy and reputation, and sexual behavior. In the early 2000s, commentators began referring to the emergence of a splinternet and the phenomenon of cyber balkanization to refer to the various bubbles people place themselves in when they are online. As such, being on Facebook can resemble living in an echo chamber which reinforces one's existing beliefs and opinions. This echo chamber precludes users from listening to or reading opinions and information that challenge their viewpoints, thus making them more partisan and close minded. It shows that even a seemingly open and democratic media may be co opted towards undemocratic means. Global online propaganda will be the biggest threat to face as the globalization of media deepens. Media consumers must remain vigilant and learn how to distinguish fact from falsehood in a global media landscape. The three primary ways in which people interact globally: economics, politics, and culture. Media and political globalization. An essential process of globalization is political. Globalization has transformed world politics in profound ways. We have media corporations that are themselves powerful political actors who are trying to conquer as much power as possible. In media and cultural globalization, media is a primary carrier of culture. Through newspapers, magazines, movies, advertisements, televisions, radio, the internet, and other forms, the media produce and display cultural products from pop songs to top films. And lastly, media and economic globalization. An essential process of globalization is political. Globalization has transformed world politics in profound ways. We have media corporations that are themselves powerful political actors who are trying to conquer as much as power as possible. No globalization without media. The partnership of globalization and media is clear. Oral, script, print, electronic, and digital. So mark the influences of media on globalization. It is difficult to imagine globalization occurrence without the media that are so crucial to human life. To summarize, different media have diverse effects on globalization process. Secondly, societies can never be completely prepared for the rapid changes in the systems of communication. And lastly, every technological change creates multiple unintended consequences. Thank you very much, and God bless everyone.